Chicago Bulls added 3 new players at the NBA trade deadline. And the question that I want to answer today is, are any of these players going to actually crack the rotation for the Chicago Bulls? We're going to talk about all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another mini episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for tonight, y'all. And I know this is a late upload, right? This is not a full episode. You'll still be getting your mailbag episode on Saturday. But I wanted to talk about the new additions to the Chicago Bulls. And there have been a lot of people asking questions on how do these guys factor in to any kind of plans for the Chicago Bulls. And here's the thing. I don't know if any of them factor in. Now, we did hear later in the trade deadline that Tre Jones does have a chance to crack the rotation, and even that there may be some interest by the Chicago Bulls to keep him past the point of where his contract ends, which is at the end of the season. He's currently playing on a $9.1 million deal. And so I want to talk about these guys, what they have brought to the court on their previous teams, how they could fit in for the Chicago Bulls. And we're going to start off with Tre Jones. Tre Jones is a guy that I talked about a little bit this offseason, in which the Bulls could have maybe acquired some players. And this is a guy that didn't play much at all for the Spurs this season. Only 16 minutes. He didn't start a single game. He played 28 games for them. But when you look at the last 2 years, he played 77 games in 2023-24, averaged 27.8 minutes per game. He had 10 points per game in that time period, 4 rebounds, 6 assists as well. He had one of the best assist-to-turnover ratios in the NBA when you look at it. Also, 1 steal per game. He just does not turn the ball over at all very much, right? And then the prior year in 2022-23, he played 68 games for the Spurs team, started 65 of them, 29 minutes per game, and 13 points. He also chipped in 3.6 rebounds, 6.6 assists, 1.3 steals, and only 1.5 turnovers per game. Tre Jones is a point guard in the truest sense of the word, in the sense that he can play the point guard position. You need him to distribute, he can. His shooting splits are decent. He's a 48% shooter for his career, 30% from 3, so he's not really a three-point shooter or a threat to stretch the court, which is why I think he kind of fell out with that Spurs team, especially with what they need for Wemby. And they added Chris Paul, of course. But I think that Tre Jones, hearing that he's somebody that the Bulls could look to keep, makes some sense until you start looking at the roster that we already have. Now, maybe that this is, if the Bulls somehow do lose Josh Giddey, which again, I'm not saying that they just let him walk for nothing, but if a team maybe offers him a deal that the Bulls don't feel like matching or don't feel comfortable matching, maybe you're looking at it then with Tre Jones, because I do think he's a better fit next to like Coby or even Io in that case, a more natural fit, I should say, right? But again, I'm not saying in any way that should the Bulls feel comfortable moving on from Josh Giddey because they have Tre Jones. In no way am I saying that, because that would be asinine. Josh Giddey is a far better player overall. But I think when you look at what Tre Jones does well, you also look at the impact that Tre Jones has had. Every year of his NBA career, he's had a positive impact when he's on the court. Even this year in a minuscule role, it's a plus 2.2 point differential when he's on the court. You look at last year with the Spurs, plus almost 15 points when he was on the court and 7 extra points per 100 possessions when he's on the court. And the season before that, plus 5. The only season he's had a negative point differential was his rookie year. And even then, the points per 100 possessions, they still averaged almost more, right? It was the defense that was hurting him. The defense in his rookie year was bad. Opponents were averaging 2.6 points more per 100 possessions, but he's fixed that. He's been negative every single year. So that means he's a plus defender. This year, negative 2 points per 100 possessions when he's on the court for the opposing teams. The last year where he played heavy minutes, negative 7.6 per 100 possessions when he's on the court. Also, the person he's guarding shoots the ball at almost 3% worse when he's guarding them. I'm not in no way saying that Tre Jones is some elite level defender. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying when you look at what point guards do, even despite his stature, right, at being a 6'1", 185 pound point guard, he still is able to perform really well. The problems with Tre Jones is that he really only can play one position. 88% of his minutes in his NBA career, 98% of his minutes in his NBA career have come at the point guard position, some at shooting guard, and that's just looking at matchups. So when it comes down to Tre Jones, and it's weird because some sites have him listed as 6'3", some have him listed as 6'1". Either way, he's a small guard. I don't necessarily see him being the easiest fit for the Chicago Bulls, but then again, I've been wrong before. We'll see. I don't necessarily see Tre Jones cracking the rotation except for in games where Lonzo Ball is not playing. I think that Tre Jones could slot in as that bench guard to get the ball to Modest, to get the ball to Jalen Smith, to get the ball out in transition. And again, a point guard that doesn't turn the ball over but has a really good assist ratio. I can see that really working for the Chicago Bulls, specifically on that bench unit. But again, I think he's only going to get in the game on games where Lonzo is not playing, whether because of back-to-backs or wherever else it is. But that's what I look at Tre Jones. The next player up is Kevin Huerter. Now, this is a guy who has a reputation as a shooter, and he has not been shooting ball well this season. 30% from three so far this season. He has talked about that in the clip, basically just saying like he feels that it's going to work out because of the play style and things in Atlanta. That's why it fell off. For his career, he's a 37.5% three-point shooter. 36% last season, 40% the year before that, and that's taking 5.6 per game. So there's reason to believe that that three-point shooting is going to come back around for him. He's another player that basically averaged double-digit points, right? He can get you on his career 11.5 points per game on 28 minutes played per game for his NBA career. Now, that is starting and that is playing heavy minutes. That role is definitely not going to be for him here. This is the first season of Kevin Huerter's career as well that he's not a positive in point differential or points per 100 possessions when he's on the court. So that may point to that role changing in Atlanta. You look at him, he's still a very young guy as well, 26 years old. So you don't think that there's like a major fall off as far as his ability. So maybe role does point to that as well. He's also a player that historically for his career doesn't turn the ball over a lot. He has turned the ball over more this year. The turnover percentage is up by 2%. So there's that part. And Kevin Huerter as well has never really been a great defender, right? But he's never really given up a whole lot of points. Look, you look at him for his career. This season, it's plus 2.4 points more per 100 possessions that opponents score when he's on the court. But other than that, he's never even been over a 1. So it's been like right at 0.08, 0.05, 0.03, right? So it's not like it's tremendously bad there either, right? So this is another player that, to me, it screams system player, right? That's what it screams for Kevin Huerter. He can play the 2, he can play the 3 with his 6'7", height there, and so he's a player that can play on that wing position, either position on that wing at almost 200 pounds as well. Not a great defender, but to me, Kevin Huerter just screams system player. If you have the proper system that can take advantage of him, I think when you have Josh Giddey, I think you have Lonzo Ball, him coming off screens, if he moves without the ball, I do think that he can have a more impactful season or remainder of the season for the Chicago Bulls, especially looking at next year as he's still under contract. We don't exactly know what this team's going to look like there either. So Kevin Huerter is a player that I can see fitting a role. I don't know if that role's here for him on this team. Again, it would have to come down to him passing up Dalen Terry consistently, and as well as cutting into Julian Phillips minutes, the little that he does get. So, there's that aspect of it. I don't think he's going to get a lot of minutes, but if he does, it depends on the role that you're going to use him in. Because, again, he's a role player that thrives in a role that's Kevin Huerter Jr. So, why do I want to throw Jr. into everybody's name? Kevin Huerter. We'll see what happens there with him, but I'll say this. He's been a productive player in a lot of different teams. Like I said, he averages double-digit points for his career. He does that on only 9 shots per game. Again, this screams role player. And I think that with a player's role, what kind of role you fit them in and the need that you have for them on your team is the biggest aspect of that. And we'll see if that factors in for the Chicago Bulls. The next player up that was a new acquisition, Zach Collins. Now, this is a guy who's 27, 6'11", 250 pounds, and he just brings size. I mean, when you look at him, yes, he's had seasons of averaging double-digit points the last 2 years prior to this season. This season he's only played 36 games, 11 minutes. The last 2 seasons prior to that, he averaged over 20 minutes per game, and it was 11 points and about 6 rebounds in those times, as well as 3 assists in both those seasons. So he's, again, another system player that, to me, is a solid veteran off the bench if you just need somebody as a spot big. If Jalen Smith gets in foul trouble, Vooch is in foul trouble for a game, and you need to go 3 deep into your big rotation, Zach Collins can bring that. Now, we've never really had that on this team that we've used consistently. Keep in mind, we've never really had 3 players on this roster, not counting players on 2 ways or G League players, that can actually play the center position. This now brings the Chicago Bulls to 3 players that can actually, and have for the majority of their career, played the center position. So, it does bring a little bit different for that. So in that case, I kind of see him as like, he's an emergency player. He's not going to probably see the court a lot unless it's a certain matchup. Vooch is getting cooked. There's some foul trouble. Jalen Smith is out, which could actually be the case. We'll see what happens with Jalen Smith. He missed shoot around for personal reasons. So because of that, I don't necessarily see Zach Collins having a huge role on this team either, but he is a player that can have a role on this team, a specialized role. And I think when you're looking at these 3 players overall, that's what you're looking at. These are 3 players that are bringing a specialized role to the Chicago Bulls, depending on certain matchups, situation with other players, and that's what they got back. Now, of course, you got this back for Zach LaVine, which raises its own concerns, which we've already talked about ad nauseum. But overall, I don't expect to see a lot of these guys. They may be given some opportunity with injuries and other things that we have going on. But other than that, I don't see them playing a huge role or factor for the Chicago Bulls. But let me know what you guys think down below. Wanted to get this video out because we've made a lot about what the Bulls didn't do at the trade deadline or the draft pick they got back for Zach. Haven't really talked a lot about what these players could bring and what their skill sets are. And I think you brought in 3 players with you brought in a true point guard in Tre Jones who can take care of the ball and distribute and is an okay defender, especially for his size. You brought in a solid system player in Kevin Huerter, who's a solid shooter for his career, even though it's down right now, that doesn't need a whole lot of shots to get you double-digit points. And then you brought in a depth big in Zach Collins, who can score a little bit, especially in pick and roll, is an okay defender at times, right? But overall, not necessarily, you're not looking at him and saying he's a defender either. He's a big body that can get you some rebounds. His rebounding rate, especially offensively, is really, really good. So those are things that they can bring to this Bulls team. But let me know what you guys think on everything down below. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. And I'll see you guys on the next one, which is dropping in a couple of hours for the mailbag. Love you guys. Go Bulls. See Red. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.